Appreciate all the help I can get tonight. So we're going to, tonight, we're going to try to explore Zoom the best we can together. We're going to try to make use of the variety of features that it has, and we are going to expect imperfection tonight. I think we could all get comfortable with that idea. We are going to create an environment of play and exploration. We're going to have fun. We are going to deal with all of the unforeseen events in our class and space. We just, believe it or not, a half hour ago had one of our guest presenters cancel tonight. She had an issue with her team. One of her team members called in sick, and Kelly Carlisle had to step up and take over for her this evening in a program, so she unfortunately wasn't able to join us. So we'll have just that much more time to interact together, and also to hear from our other guest, Beth Ratner, who is the executive director of the Biomimicry Institute. Okay, so I have made a few slides to guide the conversation tonight, and I will now attempt to share my screen with you, and we will take it from here. I can see your comments, so if you have comments or suggestions, you can keep them going and we will monitor them. Somebody told me my hair looks goof. I guess that's a compliment. But Fiona and Allison are going to be co-hosts tonight, and they will kind of monitor the chat and keep an eye on things. And if you need to send a specific message to them, you can do that as well. I'm seeing some of your emojis. It looks like people are in pretty good shape. I do see a few unhappy people, which I can imagine this is a tough time for a lot of you. There's so much uncertainty going on in the world, on campus, I'm sure affecting your friends and family. So tonight we're going to have a special class really focused on what we can learn from a garden. And we're going to learn about sort of lessons from the garden. I'm going to try to advance my slides here too. There we go. So the original plan was to have Beth, Kelly, and me speaking with you tonight, but it'll just be me and Beth. And as you are probably well aware, if you've tuned into the news at all today, that the COVID-19 outbreak has now been named a pandemic by the World Health Organization. And that's of significance because now the World Health Organization is telling countries and governments and health organizations that they should brace and prepare to treat people. Before they declared it a pandemic, all of the effort was on containment. And now the effort is spread again across both containment and treatment. So as the country of Italy has seen just an overwhelming exponential growth in cases, which has in many cases overwhelmed the healthcare system. So hence the university's decisive move to move all classes online. Almost every university that I checked in with respect to either family or friends in different schools are now in remote mode. Some schools are actually encouraging and sending their undergraduate students home. So just, it's a very dynamic environment, and we're going to do what we can tonight to learn what we can do to stay healthy. This word hygiene is very much in the news. There's personal hygiene that we're encouraged to do, washing our hands frequently, not touching our face. There's also social hygiene. There's no handshaking or hugging or kissing. And we are supposed to practice something called social distancing, which we're kind of doing right now. But I think what's really important during this time is to be sure that you are really staying kind of calm and grounded the best you can. Tonight, and I'm going to invite you to do this and join me. This is not a commercial, but a nice cup of chamomile tea is a very soothing and relaxing kind of antidote to all the chaos. So hygiene becomes very important, and food safety is very much in the news now too. And today in Marion Nestle's Food Politics newsletter, she wrote some very good pointers about coronavirus and food safety. And there's some concern about sharing food, and you have to kind of become mindful now, even more mindful of how you share food and get food, and maybe get food from public places. There's no evidence right now that the virus spreads via food, but I found this clip that I wanted to share with you that I thought was funny. It's from 1993, which I realize is probably from before when many of you were born, but one of my favorite shows was this show called Seinfeld.
What are you doing? Huh? Did you just double dip that chip? You double dip the chip? What are you talking about? You dipped the chip, took the bite, and you dipped again. So it's like putting your whole mouth right in the dip. From now on, when you take a chip, just take one dip and end it. Well, I'm sorry, Timmy, but I don't dip that way. Oh, you don't, huh? You dip the way you want to dip. I'll dip the way I want to dip. Give me the chip! Hey! Give me the chip!
Well, I hope that you will take Timmy's advice and don't double dip your chips. What we have to do now, really collectively, is do our best to contain the spread of the virus, and the best way to do that is through proper, really, mindfulness and hygiene. This is a chart that appeared today in the New York Times. These are two epi curves, sort of epidemic curves, and you can see that the epidemiologists are really encouraging us to flatten the curve. This is the opposite of going viral, like we talked about last week. And so with protective measures, you can see the number of cases diminishes dramatically and hopefully grows or flattens out, if you will, in a way that the healthcare system can assist and support the people who are in need. So that's my opening thoughts for us before we get into the garden. And I thought it would be fun to think about, what do change makers and entrepreneurs think about when things don't go as planned, or when they're dealt unexpected circumstances. And in the entrepreneurial world, they call that a pivot. And there's some famous stories of companies and organizations pivoting, if you will, into different modes. Probably one of the most famous is a company called Twitter, which I'm sure you've heard of. But Twitter actually started out as a podcasting service, believe it or not. And soon after they launched their podcasting service, Apple launched their own podcasting platform, and they realized that they were going to be toast. I think the company was called Odeo. And one of the engineers at Odeo was working on like a little private pet project, which was 140 character personal instant updates. And he kind of pitched that one day at a meeting when they were sitting around thinking about what they should do. And that little product innovation became a major platform, very influential platform, Twitter. And if you're interested, there's a lot of intrigue behind how that all happened, because the person, Noah Glass, who came up with the idea, was actually fired and really didn't get much credit for his innovation. The other thing that I think is interesting is that this grew out of kind of a product engineering innovation. Twitter did this ability to create this 140 character rapid tool, and they never really thought about the implications of the technology. They're the unintended consequences of the technology. And now we have this incredibly powerful and influential platform, which is truly disrupting a lot of the way governments communicate and the way information is shared. So anyway, I thought I would coin a new word tonight, and going with Donella Meadows' systems dance, the first thing we have to do is get the beat of the moment. And I think this moment calls for not a pivot, but a vivet. So that's my contribution. I hope you get that. That's virus plus pivot is a vivet. So tonight we're going to talk about how ideas spread and how we might, as a community, co-create and rise to the occasion in this moment. And we're going to embrace the toolkit of design thinking. And we're going to talk about how might we redesign edible education 101 together. So what we're going to do is we are going to show up and adopt a growth mindset. That means we're going to show up for this moment and embrace the potential to do things that we've never done before, to learn quickly and to learn together. We're going to own this moment. That's something that change makers do. They quickly grasp what the new reality is and they adapt to it and they own it. We will try something that's new or challenging. I'm trying something new or challenging tonight, which is the breakout tool of this, this platform. We're going to adopt a sense of play and experimentation. We're going to have fun. There's no right or wrong answers. There's no grading. There's no, we're lowering expectations. We're going to lower risks. We are going to relax the attendance policy now that we're in this mode of online learning. Each of these classes is going to be recorded and posted to B courses and YouTube. So if for some reason your day is disrupted and you can't be here live, you'll be able to participate, but we really want you here live. It would be wonderful because we are going to do as many interactive things. We're going to generate a bunch of new ideas tonight. In a minute, I'm going to put you into a breakout room with 3 other classmates, and you're going to have a chance to both test the platform and also generate some ideas about how we can innovate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this breakout tool. I'm going to suggest that it'll automatically put you in groups of 4. You may be in a class with people who are you may be in a room with people who are registered in the class. You may also be in the room with some members of the community. We have about 40, 45 people in the community. I'm going to give you about 6 minutes after you introduce yourself with virtual handshakes, which you can mime if you like on the Zoom. And then you can do 6 minutes of brainstorming. I want you to generate as many ideas as you can about how we might evolve or redesign or change the class so that it fits this new medium now that we're not together every Wednesday night in that wonderful auditorium, feeling the energy and excitement of our special guests and topics and learning together. How can we make the most of this space? So you're going to generate as many ideas as you can. You're going to listen and wait for other people to speak and share this digital space, kind of get the feel, get the beat, if you will, of this place. And then one person in the group, you should decide who's going to be the scribe and going to record all the ideas on a notepad. And then the group is going to select the 2 strongest ideas and share them on the Zoom chat with everyone. And Allison and Fiona and Beth are going to look over those ideas. And then I'm going to bring you all back together as a community. And we're going to talk a little bit about the experience together. So wish me luck on the breakout rooms. Okay, so we're going to assign you into breakout rooms of 4 to 5 people, and it's going to happen automatically. It's going to create 44 rooms. Have fun.
Bye.
All right. Hopefully we are back in session now. And I wonder what that was like. Oh, look, a lot of good ideas are coming in now. Kate McDowell says, use the polling features. We're going to do that in just a minute, Kate. We're going to go through these on the chat. I can't really read them in real time because you are absolutely flooding us with great suggestions. Would anyone like to talk right now? If you'd like to show your face to the class and share an idea, we would be happy to do that. So if you want to just chime in here, you will go on speaker view and we can hear you. Anybody brave enough to do that in front of 198 other people? Come on, Kate. Kate McDowell, you're just looking at me there. You're in your comfortable room. Say something, just so I know this works. You can go off mute. Tell us your idea that you posted on chat. There she is.
I think I just unmuted you, Kate, so you should be able to talk.
Awesome. I think it would be helpful to use the polling feature that you can access. So you can ask a question and then everyone can respond yes or no. Because I think that would be cool to hear what everyone.
Let's try that right now, Kate. Thanks for that suggestion.
I'll mute you again.
I'm going to launch a poll, okay? Ready, everybody? 2 questions for polling. Okay, that's pretty good. We have about 150 responses out of 174 people participating. And looks like everybody wants to grow their own food except for one person. That's pretty encouraging. And you'll learn more about the answers to number 2 as we have the rest of the, I'm going to share the results now. And I noticed that Josie, okay, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to get rid of this. And now Josie Lee has raised her hand. Can you unmute Josie Lee, Fiona?
Yes, she should be unmuted now.
Are you guys eating?
Yep, we made food together, which sort of inspired some ways that we can be resilient and like adapt edible education.
Yeah, and we were also thinking maybe going back to past lectures, like there's a really big wealth of knowledge from in the past years that we could try and implement, I don't know, some type of like exploring those lectures and taking what we can from those.
Because speakers wouldn't be able to come to campus or they wouldn't feel comfortable giving their lectures on Zoom.
Great idea. Thank you.
Thanks.
What are you eating there?
It was really good.
It's such a good salad.
Wow, you're not double dipping, are you?
I had my own plate.
Okay, just wash those forks real good. All right, I'm going to share my screen again, and then I'm going to bring Beth on in just a few minutes, or now, actually. I'm going to introduce you to Beth Ratner. Let's see. How about that? Well, thank you for that experiment. That was, I thought that went well. We're going to do one more breakout later on in the class. I'd love some feedback from you about how that worked. I noticed that some people were just on audio, and that's harder to connect and coordinate. So what I would really encourage for the next breakout is to use your video too, so you can really interact. Platform's very robust. Okay, so now I am going to ask Beth Ratner to come on, and I'm going to figure out, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Beth, are you there?
I am here.
Oh, good. Now stay there. Don't move. No, keep talking. Just like ad-lib something, because I want to figure out how to pin your.
Sure. You just click on that square where you see me at the top. I'm going to request that that you guys stay on video, because it's so much more enjoyable to pretend like I'm talking to humans instead of just not seeing anybody. Thank you. That's great. I can't see all of you, of course, but I can see 6 of you, and I'll take it. Will, sorry, did you want to introduce me more properly before?
Yes, I do. Can you still hear me if I do that? Okay, so this is Beth Ratner. Beth is the executive director of the Biomimicry Institute, a very august and respected organization that studies the lessons of nature and how they can be applied in the worlds of design and medicine and architecture and vast number of interdisciplinary fields. Beth was trained as a lawyer by her education, and she's been very involved in the rapid evolution of environmental action and planning. She's held positions with really interesting organizations called like Blue Sky, that's done some really progressive consulting in the corporate realm at the intersection of environmentalism, and also very involved in the Cradle to Cradle Institute and working closely with Bill McDonough and Michael Baumgart. And now she leads this really great team, really working with Janine Benius and others around the country and around the world to further the research and application of biomimicry. So I couldn't think of a better friend and person to share lessons from the garden. Beth's also a very passionate gardener herself. And I just thought that tonight would be a great opportunity to introduce you to the world of biomimicry. So Beth, thank you very much for coming tonight, and welcome.
Thanks, Will. I appreciate it. It's really great to be here, and hi to everybody. Let me just say that I did start as a lawyer. I have no background in biology. I have no background in chemistry, and somehow I have led 2 organizations that are championing both. So don't let them tell you that just because you didn't take, the hard sciences that you can't actually do this. It's I started by working for Hewlett Packard, and somebody had dropped 2 books on my desk. One was Cradle to Cradle, and the other one was Biomimicry, and ended up becoming the executive director for both organizations. So tonight we're going to do, this is a little bit of a departure from my normal spiel. So again, in the experimental play realm, we're going to try something a little bit different, because I've come to a couple of different realizations, frankly, over the last few years, and you're going to be my target audience to test out some of this messaging. So here we go. I'm going to start with this one. Okay. Everybody see the cute little owl? Excellent. So I don't know how many of you actually know what biomimicry is. Actually, we could use the chat. I went full screen, but we could use the chat feature. If you know what biomimicry is, go ahead and indicate so in your chat. So the key thing about biomimicry, which is bio being life, mimicry being to imitate, is this idea that we can actually learn tremendous amounts about the design world from nature to the point that we were just trying that exercise of design thinking, the typical process in design thinking is empathize, ideate, work through your concept with a lot of mad brainstorming in between. And the principle behind biomimicry is instead of just humans brainstorming, why can't we look to the natural world to see how they've done that same exact function? So here's the big test. You will know if you are inventing something biomimetically if you meet this fundamental criteria, which is that life creates conditions conducive to life. Meaning that if you are inventing something that ultimately is toxic, harmful, not promoting life, even if it follows a lot of the design concepts of biomimetic design, it's not really the ethos of biomimicry. Biomimicry follows 3 main camps. It's form, process, and system. So the form level, this is not a great example because it does not meet the life creates conditions conducive to life criteria, but a form example would be Velcro, because we all have it in our closet. So I'd like to start that with, as an example. Guy goes hiking, burr attaches to his dog's ear, pulls it off, looks at it under a microscope, it looks like this. It looks like those series of hooks. What could I possibly do with this? He asks himself. Velcro is created. A process would be the way that a spider from ambient conditions can spin a material that's stronger than Kevlar, has UV radiation or UV light capacity, and does so with minimal inputs. A system, of course, is thinking about a whole regenerative system. How is food for one become how does the output of one become food for the next? So this whole concept of circular economy, waste equals food, that's all a system design. So because this is called Lessons from the Garden, I thought we would start with a couple of garden creatures that you would see and talk about the kind of things that you would learn from them biomimically. So the butterfly, this is a morpho butterfly, so we don't see a lot of them here, but what's amazing about the morpho is a couple things. So when you zoom in at 5,000 times, this is what the wing looks like. And I don't know what you would describe that as, but to me that looks like a zipper or railroad ties. So it's accomplishing a tremendous number of functions. So this is a big rule with nature. It doesn't use one structure to create one function. It uses one structure to create multiple functions. So all the things that this design does, light weighting, strength, aerodynamics, of course, structural color, super hydrophobic, and is also repels volatile organic compounds, all by the same structure. So the example that you see in the water droplet below is a group out of MIT who applied this design to fabric and got the most hydrophobic surface ever created. And it's all around this idea of using structure to change our functions. At the same time, they got color. They got this same sort of brilliant blue structural color. This is a team, this is a nasturtium leaf. Actually, this is very similar to one that Will just sent me recently, but this is not the same nasturtium leaf. So you've all seen nasturtium leaf when it attracts water. The way that it's doing that is through a series of basically tiny raised hairs or raised surfaces. You can see the microscopy in the upper right-hand corner. It's very similar to how the lotus leaf works as well. And what it's basically doing is that there's a high surface tension to water. The water droplet holds because basically the hairs hold it in place. This is a team out of Harvard who is applying that as a silicone-based spray to extrude those same nano-level fibers onto a toilet, onto a surface. So now all of a sudden you have far less cleanup to deal with. You have far less bacteria that you have to deal with. Super slippery surface. They're also doing it in automotive as well. And you can't tell from this picture, but because it's at the nanoscale and because it's silicone based, you can't see it. It doesn't look different. This is a team out of Brazil. So 2 brothers who were paragliding across the Atlantic rainforest. They were noticing that the rainforest wasn't getting reforested as fast as they had heard. They heard that there was a lot of money being spent on reforestation. Only find out that indeed somewhere between 30 and 50% is succeed. in terms of reforestation efforts. And it's not really hard to think about that or to understand why, because if you're a volunteer and you're climbing up the side of a mountain in a rainforest and you dig your hole and you plant your little sapling and you say, good luck, little sapling, and then you never visit again because you were a one-time WWF volunteer and you don't go back week after week because you're trying to plant millions of acres, you can see why there's such a high failure rate. So this team asked the question, well, how does nature, and this is the key in biomimicry, is you're looking at what is the core function. So the very first thing that they had to figure out was, how does nature retain nutrients? And so it had to be able to collect ambient leaf litter and moisture and aggregate it in very degraded soil. So it looked to the bromeliad plant, that's the plant you're seeing in the bottom left-hand corner, how it has those basically triangular and raised edges that move and capture the water, capture ambient leaf litter, and drive it back down toward the base of the plant. So they took this design, used biodegradable plastic, applied it to the structure on the perimeter. At the same time, the sheer size of it prevented the invasive grasses from growing up, and it prevented the leafcutter ants, which don't like to crawl upside down, and there's a curved surface. So they were able to actually repel the ants at the same time. So they divided up all of those functions, looked for natural mimicry design, and were able to apply it. Their restoration rate is 90%. So it's been an incredibly successful program. They're hoping to plant about 2.5 million trees in just next year. This one gets me every time. So I don't know if you guys, I could have done this as a poll, but I'm telling you the answer. Literally more than 1 million birds die every day by hitting the glass of your house, office buildings, any place where you're almost at tree level and it's reflective. The birds can't discern between where the glass is because they're seeing the reflection of the tree. This could potentially be worse with new dynamic or smart glass, which is actually more reflective for UV reasons. So that's an actual photo by an artist who does work for the Audubon Society. So, but here's the crazy thing, birds do not hit spider webs. Why don't birds hit spider webs? Because there is UV light refraction in each one of the strands. So this team out of Germany, actually, Arnold Glass, created a product called Ornolux, and they wove UV fibers into the glass. And so, like it says, what a bird sees is this cross mesh. What we see is nothing because we don't see UV light. That's not part of our visible spectrum. So you have this really ingenious idea that's actually saving the lives of birds. This is so in the back, on the upper right-hand corner, you see a blue door. That blue door leads to the bathroom. The bathroom flushes. Instead of the sewage going out through it to a sewage treatment processing plant, it comes right into the center of the building, and the roots are processing the waste. Sorry, I just looked over and saw that you guys are all sitting on the couch together, and it made me laugh. So what's amazing about this is every year, like it says here, 860 billion gallons of untreated waste are going into the local waterways, whether that's your river, your creeks, directly into the ocean, and it happens for all sorts of failure reasons. This is a mechanism created by a guy named John Todd, and he realized that wetlands are hyper adroit at processing dense amounts of nutrients. And sewage, our waste, is essentially a nutrient that is just too condensed and going into basically the wrong place when it just leaks right out into the rivers. By condensing the wetland design, so he's taken all of this and compressed it into these planters, and you have multiple screens and medium that it works with, he's able to actually have perfectly functioning gray water. A lot of people believe it's actually potable water, meaning you could, in theory, even drink it, but it's really at this point just going directly into the garden. This is out of Rhinebeck, New York, the Omega Institute. I should be looking, should I pause for a second and see if there's questions, or should we take those at the end? What do you guys prefer?
Someone says, could you eat from that garden?
Yeah, you can. You can. This is also covered in permaculture too. Roots are incredibly powerful at processing live bacteria. And I don't personally recommend it, but there are a lot of permaculture teachers I've had who say it is fine. So I'm going to keep going, but then feel free, Will, just to interrupt and have me talk. It says, I'm just going to do a couple more teams and then we're going to talk about something a little bit different. So here's another team out of New York. They're in Brooklyn. They looked at the spider web for a different reason. They looked at how basically it's a great mechanism for capturing ambient moisture. So, and I'm sure we've all seen this at some point after a dewy morning or even, of course, a rainy morning. So that process was emulated in their design. This is actually attached to the side of a container. They're able to attract ambient moisture, funnel it down into these catchment devices, which is kind of emulating a little bit of how cactus also store water. The original design that they had was much more pod-like and cactus-like. But this is the design that they've actually commercialized. And so now they're doing container gardens in Brooklyn, and they're able to pull from just the air 300 liters a day off of a 100 square foot surface. So those are some that's helpful to ground you in what is biomimicry, how do you define function, how do you find an appropriate model in nature, and then how do you begin to emulate it. But this is the part where I'm shifting tacks a little bit, and then we're going to talk about something that I don't usually talk about. So you have to kind of ask yourself this fundamental question, as there are now 7.5 billion of us. What is our role here? And I think it's this. I'm going to give you the answer, but I really want you guys can put it into the chat as well. Only monitor yourselves. I think the role of humans is to co-create, but we're not here to dominate. We're not here to dominate the 8.7 million other species that live here. And in particular, at the time that we live in right now, what is the role of humans? I think it's that we're the first generation to realize the immense amount of damage we've caused, whether that's for climate, whether that's for species extinction. And a lot of people believe we're the last generation to appropriately repair and restore it. And I picked this map of the United States because it begins to highlight how dense we are and what we have done to the best arable land, the most growable land in the United States. That's where people originally settled because they could farm there. And as a result, we've literally paved over the most intelligent life that we know about that's actually responsible. Other than the marine environment, soil of course contains 10 billion bacterial cells per gram. That amount of density of life, which exists around the roots of each plant, is actually still a mystery to a lot of soil scientists. We're not entirely sure what is in soil. We know that it's similar to infant formula in that it's taken us literally 100 years to understand what's in breast milk. We still don't really get it right. This was actually one of my first anecdotes about why biomimicry is so hard. Back in 1867, they thought that breast milk was the same as cow's milk, plus or minus a little bit of wheat flour and some malt flour that they added to it. It took 100 years, almost, 1867 to 1959, for them to go, we're missing iron. That's what we should add. If we added that to baby formula, it would be just like breast milk. And then, of course, we realized, oh, we better add taurine for development, skeletal muscular development. Just in 2000 was when we finally added DHA and some of the other polyunsaturated oils. Just recently, in the last few years, we realized that actually for colostrum, it's mostly actually probiotics. It's not even nutrition at all. It's just probiotics. So if we can't even get baby formula right, and we care so much about our babies, how are we really going to understand what's in soil? We're going to really have to we need soil scientists who study nothing but. The problem is that at a rapid rate, we are paving right over that soil. Humans are not super great at that deep level of understanding about the very ground that we walk upon. This is an aerial view of Silicon Valley, which was once one of the most productive areas of farmland in all of California. So when I was a kid, I thought this was a garden. I thought this was actually the pinnacle of what a garden could look like. I thought there was nothing more beautiful than order and symmetry and like monoplantings, because we like order. Humans are a little spooked out by nature in general, and so when we see order, it makes us feel comfortable. It's also artistic. I mean, like no disrespect to the people at the Biltmore Gardens who did this. It is definitely artistic, but it's not a real garden. I would argue that neither are vineyards. And as much as we all like the byproduct of it, this is not how nature would design a garden. We like lines, we like order, we like, of course, the mechanization that it allows for. We like lining people up so much we do it for fun, as in marching bands. There's another way to look at this. So we also do lines, of course, for freeways and how we do urban planning. So this is an example of a very densely populated area in Los Angeles, Pasadena, just outside of Los Angeles. It's called the Urban Homestead. Uh-oh. Are you guys still there?
Yes, we're still here.
Oh my gosh, you all went dark for just a second.
Oh, weird.
Can you still, let's see, if I go back to, am I still sharing my screen?
No, we see your.
You see me. Let me go back to sharing.
Okay, I can see your screen again.
Excellent. So let me go back to playing and see if it, okay. Thanks, Fiona. Okay. So here's the crazy thing about this farm. It's 1/10 of an acre. 1/10 of an acre. It grows 6,000 pounds of food every year. And we're finding that you can do that when you begin to understand how to really work with the soil and you work with gardens in 3 dimensions. It turns out that this is a practice, of course, that permaculture has implemented, but not just permaculture. This was actually how nature designs. Multiple stories, dense plantings, diversity equals resilience. These are the fundamental principles of how nature designs gardens. And you can see this evolution. It's happened in the livestock industry as well. We used to line cows up. This is unfortunately still how a lot of cattle are raised. We line them up, we keep them on just incredibly overgrazed land. And then somebody realized, wait, from a carbon sink perspective, we can start rotationally grazing. Then they realized, wait a minute, the amount of carbon sequestered in the soil goes up dramatically as soon as we introduce trees back into the equation. Because the trees, with their deeper root system, is actually sinking that carbon further where it really belongs. We can't keep the carbon just at the top layers of soil. And what's not surprising about this is the more you look at it, you're like, well, yeah, that looks like how nature would graze cattle. You know, that's how nature would allow for bison to roam through the prairie. There would be these periods of huge amounts of grasslands and then, of course, forest. This concept is actually beginning to be applied to multiple levels of garden. So this question of integrating not just for a single kind of tree, a single kind of plant, a single kind of food, but actually integrating them into what are called guilds. Guilds are, to me, the most exciting thing about gardening. How do you find a plant that actually benefits from another plant? What is it that, and there's a famous example, it's called the Three Sisters. It's corn, it's legumes, and it's beans. How do each one of them benefit the other, both chemically, structurally, and ultimately from a position of when they begin to decompose? Guilds are essentially getting all of your fertilizer, your nutrients, and your structural support in one spot, and they will help each other. If you like guilds as much as I do, you will start to find charts like this, which is a companion planting guide. And you can find a friend for any plant you want. I will send this to Will so you guys can all have it. But it is, you get like pretty excited. So In addition to finding out like what guild should I make for my apple tree, because I care about my apple tree so much, turns out planting comfrey is going to be really good for it. Planting daffodils is going to be really good for it. Then I worry about, oh wait, I've got a problem with ants. I look on my little chart over here and I find out what else I can plant with it that will repel ants. You have a self-supporting system because you don't have to intervene very much. Nature, when properly co-creating with nature, there's a sense of harmony, and it is complex, but it's not complicated. There's a difference. This same idea of operating in guilds where the waste from one becomes the inputs for the other is actually being applied back to industry. This is an example out of Denmark called Kalundborg, where they realized, this power station realized like it was producing a tremendous amount of waste steam. So that steam was actually going to be used by another plant. And then it turns out it could actually feed greenhouses that were also nearby. And then at the same time, they were bringing back fresh water back into the lake. This industrial symbiosis is the new model for the circular economy. And it all goes back to the same way that the oak guild or the permaculture or the forest was working to begin with. This idea of making sure that truly there is no waste in a system is actually how we're going to reinvent it. Not just our gardens, but also our industry. I should do this as a poll. Well, I won't do it as a poll because it's too complicated. But I will ask a question. How many billions, oops, that's the dog. How many billions of pounds of clothing do you think we produce every year? Just go ahead and put it into the chat. How many billions of pounds of clothing do we produce every year? Oops. Thank you for dealing with my dog. The answer is anywhere between 80 and 100 billion every year, which is why, by the way, we burn or landfill the equivalent of a truckload every second because we have that much clothing to get rid of. This is the work of Rebecca Burgess. She runs an organization called Fibershed. Highly recommend. She's here based in Marin. And she's seeing this whole idea of integrated crops. So now think about your guild, think about your permaculture garden at a farm level scale. Now all of a sudden you've got your goats running through your hemp, running through your corn. And she says here that you can actually have an integrated agricultural system of wool, hemp, wheat, lamb, and dairy. In addition to all of the food that it produces, you'd get another 113 million tons of natural fiber per year. You wouldn't have to convert any new farmland, and that's enough to generate 23 billion one-pound garments. We are not thinking about our soil the right way. We are not thinking about our systems the right way, and therefore we have tremendous waste. When we can think about all of these things operating together, that's biomimetic design. So we talked a lot about biomimicry forms and even processes. This is biomimetic systems. Turns out that this is actually how the Native Americans did it. Here in Northern California, the Coast Miwok, the Pomo Indians, they tended the wild. This is a book by a woman named Kat Anderson. She's out of UC Davis. So she said that when John Muir first came to California and he's looking and he's like, you can walk across the fish, in the backs of fish, like the rivers are so filled. You see the hills are filled with lupin and they're filled with bunch grass. Turns out it wasn't just nature operating alone. It wasn't just wilderness. It was people. People had intervened in the system. People had actually created that kind of prosperity and diversity of planting and richness to the soil. There's a quote by a Miwok here, an elder here, who says that the white man surely ruined this country. It's turned back to wilderness. The conservation movement is so important, but I think we're not fully understanding what it means to run the conservation movement the way the people who lived in this land for many, many generations before we did. And it shows, in this book, it shows a series of cycles of what happens when you don't manage land. Most of the time in these scenarios, most of the time you actually get eventually they'll just die off on their own. Intervention, when done well, when done in relationship to the land, allows for hyper levels of productivity. So that's where we are today, right? We are at this place right now where we recognize the role of land sinks for carbon sequestration, and also the role of agriculture, regenerative agriculture for carbon sequestration. We are at this place right now where those two categories alone could be responsible for almost half of our targets. This is all from Project Drawdown. If you guys aren't familiar with Drawdown, I highly recommend it. But then just when you think you're getting to this final place of like, okay, I understand the value of soil. I understand I can mimic nature to do more dense integrated management. I can get all the things I want, my food, my fiber, my fashion. I can get everything I want. There's one important question, which is that for a system to really be operable, we can't be the only ones running it. How are we going to allow for all life on Earth? How are we going to allow for this guy? This is the red-eyed frog out of Costa Rica. We are at a time of such mass extinction, 1,000 times the background rate, which means that extinction is always happening, but it's 1,000 times more accelerated right now. We can't design just for carbon. We got to design for everybody. This is the time, this is a great quote out of the Nature Conservancy. Of all the plants and animals with whom we share this planet, only humans have the power to choose the path of our collective futures. That is going back to the question of what is the purpose of humans? Right now, this is our purpose. No one else can do this. Like, I can't say that more strongly. Nobody else, no other species can fix it. We created it. We're literally the only ones who can get us out of it. I don't know if Dan Barber has spoken. I know he's spoken in your class before, Will, but I don't know if he's spoken for this particular class. But did you already recommend that people watch his TED Talk on falling in love with a fish?
No, but I will.
Please do. It's so great. Small spoiler alert, just in case. This is a wetland in Spain, in southern Spain. Originally, they drained it. The Argentinians had come in, a company had bought the land in Spain. They drained it and put cattle on it. This happens all over the place. Mowing down forests to put cattle on it, draining wetlands to put cattle on it. In this particular case, the water kept coming back in, so it didn't really work for them, so they abandoned the land. This NGO comes in, they buy the water, they buy the land rights, and they fill it back up with water, and they stock it with fish. Pretty soon, the flamingos from 100 miles away start flying in on a daily basis to eat the fish. And the people managing it don't care at all. In fact, they're thrilled. They're losing 20% of their crop, their fish, to the flamingos. And they are thrilled because the quality of the fish, as Dan Barber will tell you, is the best fish he's ever had in his life. So watch that video, because it's when we talk about the role of humans, what's possible through our creativity and through our deeper understanding of how nature really works, we're going to get to new food models that look like this. We're going to get to new integrated models where animals that we think of as taking away our profits are actually indicators of the health of the system. So I'll leave you with this one last view. This view, 50 years ago, was what changed the zeitgeist. It's why we have Earth Day. It's why we have the environmental movement. It was the first time that humans looked down and saw, oh, we're by ourselves here. It's just us. There is no life. There might be life on other planets, but we don't know about it yet. This is it. And from that recognition and from that really design cue of seeing ourselves kind of self-contained, a new level of understanding emerged. And that's where we are today. That's how can we take all of this great learning, amplify it, and bring it to what's needed at this time.
Thank you, Beth. That was wonderful.
You're welcome.
And it's the 50th anniversary, isn't it, of Earth Day?
It is the 50th anniversary.
And yeah, this was really a remarkable moment. We're going to celebrate Earth Day, hopefully on campus, with Jose Andres.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for that. That was really valuable. If you turn your screen sharing off.
Fiona, I was actually just going to ask you to do that. I've lost the little clicker that says I can. It used to say stop sharing, but I don't see it anymore.
I don't know if I can,
Let me see.
if I can go back. Okay,
So
I'm gonna stop your screen sharing and go to my
Perfect.
screen sharing. And I was thinking that I would also do a little poll here to just play with that feature. Let's do a second poll just to see if you were paying attention. Let's just see how this works. Can you see that now? It was interesting. One of the students too, Beth, mentioned while you were talking, before you got to the reference about the Native Americans, the person was asking, could we learn something from Native peoples about biomimicry? And then there was another question, maybe you could just talk to while people are taking the poll, is there scientific research that supports this, or is it just observational biomimicry?
Yeah, it's a great
And
question.
what should people maybe also, and then I'm going to get into my presentation.
Yeah.
But what, maybe give a reading recommendation of what people should read. If
Oh, yeah. Janine Benyus wrote the book called Biomimicry like 23 years ago. It's called Biomimicry, Innovation Inspired by Nature. More recently, a guy named Jay Harmon wrote the book The Shark's Paintbrush, which I also highly recommend. It's a little bit easier to read. Janine's a science writer, so it's pretty sciencey. And so to answer the question, yeah, there's a lot of science behind biomimicry. It just depends upon who was the inventor. Some people come at it solely from a science background. Others come at it solely from a design or engineering background. And so it kind of depends upon the innovation that we're talking about. There's a lot, like Will introduced me, there's a lot in the biomedical space in this realm. It's infinite, like the number of inventions that are coming down the way. The number of patents and papers that are coming out of bio-inspired design is like a hockey stick curve.
Right. Now, Fiona, can you see my screen?
Yes. And I can also share the poll results if people want to see them.
Yeah, why don't you, I'm going to try to turn, okay. I tried to share this poll results, but it didn't.
Let me try.
Okay.
Can
Okay,
folks
good.
see them?
Yep.
Okay, I'll stop sharing now. Looks like people
Great.
guessed 100 billion.
Okay, I'm going to now continue with a little bit more. Okay, can you stop that, or do I have to stop? There we go. Okay, so I am going to share some lessons from a garden about how to stay grounded in turbulent times. And I'm going to talk for, I don't know, maybe about 15 minutes. And then we're going to go back into breakout groups, and I'm going to ask you to share your own, let's see what happened there. What happened to my screen? There we go. I'm going to ask each of you to show up on video in your breakout group this time, and you're going to talk about what you might do together and individually to stay grounded in turbulent times. So listen to my suggestions and then take that to develop your own. And let's see if I can navigate. Well, imagine that you're about 18, I don't know, 12 months old, and somebody hands you a watering can. That sort of sets your life in motion on a path, and you get the call to the garden. So what is a garden? A garden is first of all, it's a place. It's a physical place. A garden has boundaries. One of the things that's important is the definition of the beginning and end of a garden. A garden offers often an enclosed kind of experience. And this is a picture that shows how plants and paths and roads can create borders and boundaries as opposed to fences and walls. But the idea of the garden is that you are held in a place and it frees your imagination to take flight and to feel a sense of comfort and beauty and really wonder. Now, a garden, to maintain a garden or visualize a garden really requires attention and intention. I think a lot about these as the companions, attention and intention. Now, gardens require continuous attention, and a lot of times people say to me, I just kill everything that I try to grow. I don't have a green thumb. I wasn't born with a green thumb. And I basically then ask people, well, did you pay attention to your plant or your garden? The image on the right is actually one of our students, and this is a cutting that they took from my garden, and they sent me this picture to show me how the plant was evolving, because when she got it and took this cutting, it looked just like a dead stem, and then it had just one leaf on it that was brown, and now it's been regenerating these last weeks, and it's pretty exciting. And so even if you don't have a lot of land or a lot of place, you can create a garden by giving attention. You also have to bring intention, and the gardener's intention is really about wanting to nurture and support something to grow. It's the gardener brings a sense of humility, just like what Beth was saying, is that we are working in concert with other living things, and we bring a mindset of humility and care. Now, the garden's also a process. In addition to being a place, it's a process, and it's a dynamic, growing process where we can come to observe and celebrate the seasons. And one of the beautiful things that a garden teaches you is about really just the extraordinary gifts of seasonality. And we tend to really celebrate the bloom. We're always looking at pictures of gardens in bloom. But one of the things about as you tend a garden or you spend more time in the garden is you begin to also appreciate dormancy. If the plants don't rest, if these trees, this is a pear tree in full blossom, if the pear tree doesn't rest during the winter, it doesn't have the energy to produce the blooms and the fruits of the summer. So as a gardener in a garden, we learn about process, and we learn about this dance, this systems dance. So the garden is a system, it's a living system, and as we've come to learn in this class this semester, that the soil, something that was once sort of overlooked in terms of its value, becomes the most valuable and richest asset that we have now as human beings, particularly as we try to address the staggering impacts of climate change. So now a gardener doesn't just grow fruits and flowers and herbs and trees, but is really growing soil. You might also ask, like, what's the difference between a garden and a farm? Well, that would make a good poll, wouldn't it? What the difference between a garden and a farm is, a garden tends to be oriented to aesthetic experience, like where do the paths lead, and what's just around that corner to discover, and how do I bring these companions, like Beth was talking about, these companion plants into this synergistic harmony so that they not only create a vibrant and healthy ecosystem, but also create this sort of visual gift of abundance and color. Gardens also exist in 4 dimensions rather than 3. So instead of seeing things 3-dimensionally, there's the 4th dimension of time. So as a garden, you start to really appreciate the 4th dimension of the system, is that every day is different and every moment of every day is different because of the light. And this photograph that you're looking at here is one I took this morning as I glanced under the Phoenix canariensis, which is that palm tree you just see the lower fronds of, and you see the supermoon. You see last night's supermoon in the distance through the sky between the branches of a ginkgo tree, which is still bare, but in a few weeks will begin to bud out with beautiful bright green leaves. So a garden's a system. It's also a practice. The garden is a practice. It is, for me, it's a deep source of spiritual and psychological nourishment. It's also a tremendous amount of work. This you can see, this is actually my daughter was home over the holidays and she was out in the rose garden pruning with me. It's also dangerous. These are very, very razor sharp thorns on these rose canes. And so she's got these thick leather gloves on and boots and pants. And someday I'll show you, if you're interested, like the scars that I have from not being that wise. But the garden is a practice, and so it means it's a physical practice, it's an emotional practice, it's also, for many, can become a source of obsession. If you've done any garden reading, which I assigned to you with Michael Pollan's essay, you get a sense of how obsessive a gardener can become about the practice. This is the picture on the right, is really what you just saw, the rose garden in winter. This was a foggy morning a couple weeks ago. You can see the bare canes in the rose garden at the Idea Garden, and you can see what I call the leaning tree. And I'll show you some other pictures of that. But because we've been talking a lot about core values in this class and how they guide our attention and intention, I thought I would share the gardener's values, at least this gardener's core values. So beauty, of course, is one, just the appreciation of beauty, and beauty not just, again, celebrating the bloom, but beauty celebrating the cycle and the changes. And to that end, a gardener also values dynamism. This is alive and changing every moment. It is a living system that is full of surprises. Gardeners also practice and value gratitude. You develop a deep sense of appreciation and wonder for a garden. You also develop a sense of humility for our kind of small role. And right now, we're all learning the value of humility in the face of the coronavirus, as that we are helpless in many cases to the scale of nature's forces. For those of us that live in Sonoma County, we experience that firsthand with fires at our doorstep or closer for many people. Another value is generosity, because in generosity there is reciprocity. And the more we give to the garden, the more we give back to the soil, the more it produces, the more abundance is generated through generosity. So generosity is such a powerful word. It is the root of regenerative. And generosity to me as a gardener also means sharing. You've seen some weeks I've been able to bring in fruit from the garden to share with you. Nothing makes a gardener happier than sharing the bounty and the harvest. and actually now these days I try to actually share pictures of the garden with different friends and colleagues who ask me to do that. I do it a little bit on Instagram. But one of my friends told me the other day, she said, your sharing of a photograph is actually an act of harvest. And I thought that was really interesting to think of harvesting a moment in a photograph and sharing that generously. Finally, probably the most critically vital core value of a gardener is care. And that is, some people have called the gardener's vocation, the vocation of care. And in my own life, I've tried to expand and extend this value of care beyond the garden into all aspects of my life. I shared with you the first chapter of Michael Pollan's Second Nature essay. I wanted to introduce you to beautiful, compelling garden writing. There's just a whole genre of garden writing that can, take your breath away. But I just loved him talking about this moment in his childhood when he, maybe I'll just read this to you briefly, but I think of this place today as a garden, not only because it offered an enclosed and privileged space out of doors, but also because it was here that I first actually grew something. Most of the pictures I can retrieve from that time are sketchy and brittle, but this one unspools like a strip of celluloid. It must be September. I am by myself behind the hedge, maybe hiding from my sister or just poking around, when I catch sight of a stippled green football sitting in a tangle of vines and broad leaves. It's a watermelon. The feeling is of finding treasure, a right-angled change of fortune, an unexpected boon. Then I make the big connection between this melon and a seed I planted, or at least spit out and buried months before. I made this happen. For a moment, I'm torn between leaving the melon to ripen and the surging desire to publicize my achievement. It's contagious. Mom has got to see this. So I break the cord attaching the melon to the vine, cradle it in my arms, and run for the house, screaming my head off the whole way. The watermelon weighs a ton, though, and just as I hit the back steps, I lose my balance. The melon squirts from my arms and smashes in a pink explosion on the cement. Watermelon perfume fills the air, and then the memory stalls. I can't remember, but I must have cried. To see so fine a triumph snatched away, to feel Humpty Dumpty suddenly crash onto my 4-year-old conscience. Memories of one kind or another play around the edges of every garden, giving them much of their resonance and savor. I've spent thousands of hours in the garden since that afternoon, and there is perhaps some sense in which all this time has been spent trying to recover that watermelon and the flush of pride that attended its discovery. I can't recall whether I tried to salvage any part of the melon. This is my little friend Isaiah when he was about 3, with a watermelon that he planted and grew at the Idea Garden. And I just also savor this memory because this was the face of wonder. And this is what happens when you start to grow your own food. Something changes, I think, forever. Now, I wanted to share the beautiful writing of Michael Pollan for a couple of reasons. One is Michael was the person that started the Edible Ed class with Alice Waters 9 years ago. He's also a distinguished faculty member at Berkeley, and with any luck, he will join us in class on the last class of the semester. Hopefully we'll be back in the auditorium and we can meet in person. Michael is a extremely talented writer, and if you want to read more about his experiences in the garden, Second Nature is a great book. as is The Botany of Desire. That one, I think, changed my life. And of course, Omnivore's Dilemma changed many people's experience of food. Okay, we've got a few more minutes. I'm going to give you a couple of quick lessons that I've taken away from the garden, and then I'm going to put you back in those breakout rooms for the final part of the class. Just remember, we're not taking attendance, but we really love having you show up in person. Showing up in person, you'll get a jump on the homework assignments, and you'll also get a chance to feel this connectivity with your fellow classmates. So the first lesson I wanted to share with you about the garden is, in turbulent times, is to take a long-term view. Even though we are in a moment of crisis, we do know that this crisis will pass, and recalling that we can take a long-term view of things and regain our perspective is really important. This is a picture of that rose garden just yesterday, that you just saw those bare branches a few weeks ago. So this is one of the extraordinary miracles of that fourth dimension of the garden, that bare stick-like canes that you would never know could produce a flower are already leafing out in abundance. Another lesson is that in your own life and in a garden, you need to establish the conditions for success. And this is within the gardener's power and purview, and it takes thought and planning, attention and intention. It takes time and resources. It takes a lot of energy. But if you think about how to establish the conditions for success in your own life right now, you will more likely thrive than suffer. And so one of the things I'm going to ask you to think about in the breakout group is, how can you, during this time of challenging disruption that we're all going through, establish conditions for your own success and well-being? This is just a picture I wanted to show you. This is what is going to happen in a couple of weeks, but the roses go from leafing out to flowering. And when you take care of the soil and you prune them at the right time and they get the proper water and sun, they just flourish. Another lesson I think we can take away from right now is to cultivate reciprocity. And reciprocity is really the act of giving and receiving, and caring and receiving care. And I think you can think about this with vegetables, and you can think about this with your family and your friends and your classmates. And if you actually put the energy into cultivation, cultivation is a continual process. Cultivation is not transactional, it's relational. So cultivating reciprocity is an ongoing practice of sharing, of giving, and receiving. And one of the things I think we're going to have to do as we move this class online is learn how to be reciprocal in our relationships. That's why we ask you to show your face on the video, because it's giving more of yourself to your peers. So when you show up in the breakout room, I'm going to ask you to reciprocate by going on video and participating actively, getting to know some new friends while you do it. This is a picture of another one of my little garden friends. This is Ceci. Ceci's a student in Oakland, and she has a calling to the garden, and she comes up to visit me every couple weeks, and she is learning all about reciprocity. She always leaves with something from the garden, and she always brings back something to put in the garden. And this was her with one of the biggest Buddha's hands that she picked off this tree just a few weeks ago. Finally, you want to touch the earth. To care for yourself now during these turbulent times and how to stay grounded, you want to really care for yourself and others. I have to confess, sometimes when I'm feeling weary or discouraged or exhausted, one of the things that I do is I find a nice piece of land or ground, and I literally lie down in the ground and I surrender myself. And if you've ever done that, you know it can be really a transformative and healing feeling. So the final lesson tonight is about staying grounded. And the way I think about staying grounded is to take a lesson from probably one of the most extraordinary grasses in the plant kingdom, and that is bamboo. Bamboo is this amazing grass that roots deeply, but is incredibly flexible and can bend dramatically in wind and torrents and unknown and dynamic circumstances. So it stays grounded, but it also stays flexible at the same time. So that's my final suggestion to you, to whenever you're feeling a little bit off balance or out of kilter or scared or concerned or anxious during these times, just think to yourself, be bamboo. So that's what I wanted to share with you. I wanted to share this word that comes from the ancient Greeks, eudaimonia. It means human flourishing. What does it mean to flourish? I'd like to ask yourselves each that question. What does it mean to flourish? And if you want to follow my Instagram and my pictures of the garden, that's my Instagram account. And then this is a picture that my son took of me in a state of wonder and amazement last May in the rose garden. So that's my little piece. It's 7:48. I'm going to give you a couple other thoughts, and then I'm going to send you off to the breakout rooms. So your homework is going to be over the next several weeks to find a friend or two and make a field trip to a garden. You're going to visit a garden. Now there's a garden right in our backyard, a spectacular garden on campus called the UC Botanical Garden. As far as I know, it's still open. Tilden Park has a botanical garden. You learned about the Giltrack Farm. There's the gardens at Heather Farm, which are a short drive away, or in Walnut Creek. I think you can get there on BART too. There's the San Francisco Botanical Garden. And then there's, of course, the Idea Garden, which you are welcome to visit me. You just have to send me a note and we can arrange a visit for you. So your homework by March 30th is to visit a garden, ideally with a friend or colleague or classmate. You want to experiment with the principles you learned in class today from both Beth and myself about principles of gardening and what we can learn from a garden. And then you're going to write a brief reflection about what you observed and learned and how it felt. 1 page maximum. Fiona will provide an announcement on B courses with these instructions again, so that you can carry on. Next week, we're going to have a wonderful class. Again, it's going to be online and Zoom, and it's going to be led by Sophie Egan. Sophie is a graduate of Berkeley. About 6 years ago, got her master's in public health. She is we're going to celebrate the publication of her new book. It's just coming out like literally this week. It's called How to Be a Conscious Eater. And she is going to lead a session on conscious eating and transparency. So I am going to come back to you live from my nighttime study now. And I am going to ask you to go back into the breakout rooms and spend the next 10 minutes together asking yourself this question: what are we going to do to stay grounded? And then what I would ask you to do is please share your suggestions. How are you going to care for yourselves? How are you going to create the conditions for your own comfort and well-being these coming weeks as we deal with all of these new circumstances? So I am going to open the rooms now, and if you need to move to a room, you can go out of the room and I can put you in another room. So enjoy, have a great rest of your evening. We'll be in the breakout room for about, let's see, I have to assign everybody to a breakout room. How do I do that? Let's see. How do I assign these? Let's see. Okay, if you're unassigned, looks like everybody is unassigned here. Oh, those are all, I see, those are all the people that left. Okay. All right, so if you're in a breakout room, please use your video, and please be generous, and please share your suggestions. I wish you all a good night and a good week ahead. And thank you to the teaching team, and thank you to Beth Ratner for a wonderful presentation tonight. How do I unmute you? Aria. How do I do that? I don't know how. Let's see, manage participants. Okay. Okay, unmute all.
You're like mid-rant.
Yeah.
There you go.
There
Now
we
we're all unmuted.
Hello.
Wait, why
All
is
at
that
once.
asking us to unmute?
Thank you, Will. So now you are all unmuted. If you did not join under the app, you may need to do that next time, and there will be different settings on the next webinar for you.
Sounds good.
11 to 7 p.m. They have fucking office hours.
May hear some stuff here, Will, if they were not expecting to be unmuted.
Okay, I am going to close.
Can you mute Alberto?
Mute Alberto?
Yeah, or you can give me co-host, and I can probably unmute people.
Co-host.
Thank you.
You're now a co-host.
Okay.
Yeah,
I've been at this for
fuck
3
that,
days, bro.
bro.
The same problem.
Fuck that.
So you've now been all unmuted. You can host your
Bro, I'm like, I don't want to work on this, bro.
thing here.
let's
We
just do
can
silent
hear
for now.
you right now.
Try it tomorrow, bro.
Samir, we can hear you. Let's see, who else can we hear? So you're unmuted now. So you can't, if you need to be unmuted, just let me know. And you can go ahead and speak here for your breakout session. If you have muted yourself, you will have to unmute yourself as well.
All right, well, this is good. We're getting the hang of this. I think we did okay for the first time. And
you did great.
We're going to go through all of the suggestions and see how we can evolve the class next week.
This man's still talking.
And I am going to close all the rooms now and send everybody off to have a nice
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Will.
Thank you.
Who didn't have his mic muted, and he's all, this man's still talking.
Thanks, Beth.
So I thought you guys wanted to go to